The woman was kicked out after giving birth to two mixed-race children. Her husband screamed, "Get out. I won't be the father of these black kids." The piercing cries of newborns echoed through the hospital corridors, blending with the hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors tending to their patients. Inside room 502, Vanessa, her face still flushed from labor, cradled her twin boys in her arms, utterly mesmerized by their perfect little features. Zion and Cairo, so different, yet strangely alike, were the embodiment of the love she had shared with Warren, the man she had devoted herself to for the past 5 years. A weary but radiant smile graced Vanessa's lips as she gently ran her fingers through Zion's soft black curls and caressed Cairo's plump little cheeks. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, refused to look away from the tiny miracles she had brought into the world. She could hardly wait to see Warren's reaction. In her mind, she had pictured the moment 1,000 times. The way his blue eyes would light up with pride, the joy on his face as he held their sons for the first time. Footsteps thundered down the hallway, pulling Vanessa from her thoughts. The door swung open with force, and Warren stepped inside, breathless, his face flushed as if he had sprinted all the way there. Vanessa smiled, ready to share this indescribable joy with him. But her smile froze. Something was wrong. Warren's face had gone deathly pale. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were glued to the babies in her arms. His lips moved slightly, as if trying to form words, but no sound came out. A cold shiver ran down Vanessa's spine. A creeping unease tightened in her chest. "Warren," she called softly, hesitation in her voice. "Come meet your sons." But Warren took a step back, as if he had been struck in the chest. "My sons." His voice cracked, barely recognizable. Warren stared at Zion and Cairo, then suddenly shook his head, violently, desperately. "No, they're not mine." His words hit Vanessa like a slap across the face. She looked down at the tiny infants in her arms, their light brown skin a stark contrast to her pale complexion and Warren's. And then the realization crashed over her. A sharp, unbearable pain stabbed through her chest. "Warren, please," she pleaded, tears already spilling down her face. "They're ours. They're your flesh and blood. I swear." But Warren was already shaking his head, his features twisted with rage and something far worse, disgust. "No, Vanessa, you cheated on me. You slept with some black guy." He didn't finish the sentence, but the venom in his voice was enough to make Vanessa's breath catch in her throat. He thought she had betrayed him. He refused to believe these were his children. Vanessa felt the ground beneath her crumble. "Warren, I never cheated on you. I love you. These are our babies. I swear it." But Warren's eyes were no longer filled with love. Only contempt. Only hatred. "Get out of my life," he roared, his voice like a blade slicing through her. "You and those bastard kids. I never want to see you again." And with that, Warren spun around, storming out the door and leaving Vanessa behind in utter devastation. She stood there, frozen, clutching her babies tightly as silent tears streamed down her face. In a single moment, the life she had built over 5 years came crashing down. Determined to prove her innocence, she arranged for a DNA test for the twins and Warren. But things were far from simple. Vanessa sat in silence, holding her children, until Warren spoke the words that shattered everything. Vanessa sat motionless on the long sofa in the vast living room of the Kensington estate, clutching her newborns tightly. They slept soundly in her arms, oblivious to the storm raging outside these walls. But she knew. She could feel the hurricane approaching. Across from her, Warren stood tall, his arms crossed over his chest. The man she had once trusted, once loved with all her heart, now looked at her as if she were a traitor. "The DNA test results are in." His voice was low, cold, devoid of emotion. Vanessa lifted her gaze, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. "Then what reason do you have to doubt me now?" she asked, her voice frail but laced with raw pain. Warren was silent for a long moment before tossing the envelope onto the table. "The results say the children are mine," he said slowly. But I can't believe it. Vanessa's mouth fell open. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Warren, do you even realize what you're saying? The proof is right here, and yet you expect me to accept this? Warren cut her off, his eyes burning with fury. You think a piece of paper is enough to erase my doubts? Do you even know who I am? I am Warren Kensington. My entire life, I was taught that honor and lineage mean everything. And now I'm supposed to believe that 2 children with skin like that are mine. Vanessa trembled. She had always known Warren was a man of rigid principles, but she had never imagined he would be ruled by prejudice. They are your children. She repeated the words slowly, clearly. We've been together for years. We've dreamed of this day for so long. You know I would never betray you, and yet, just because of their skin color, you're willing to deny everything. Warren shut his eyes and took a deep breath, as if struggling to contain something. But when he opened them again, all that remained was ice. Vanessa, his voice was terrifyingly calm. I want you out of my house. Tonight. She froze. What did you just say? Leave. Warren's voice was firm. I can't look at you and those children every day and not feel doubt. I can't live with this uncertainty. You have to go. Vanessa's heart clenched. She gently placed her babies in their bassinet and stood abruptly. This is my home, Warren. She met his gaze without flinching. I am your wife. These are your children. I am not leaving. Warren's jaw tightened. His fists curled at his sides. You don't have a choice. He turned, walked to the table, and picked up a thick envelope before placing it in front of her. This is money. Enough for you to start over somewhere else. Vanessa stared at the envelope as if it were something vile. You're paying me to disappear? She let out a bitter laugh, one filled with pain, disbelief, and fury. Warren didn't answer. Vanessa studied him for a long time. This was the man she had given her youth to, the man she had trusted to stand by her side forever. Now, he was casting her out like she was nothing, a stain on his perfect life. She took a deep breath, then shoved the envelope back toward him. Keep your money, Warren. Her voice was sharp as steel. I don't need it. Warren's brow furrowed. Vanessa, don't be foolish. What do you think you'll do out there? You have nothing. Vanessa gave him a small, defiant smile. You're wrong. I have my children, and they're all I need. Warren opened his mouth as if to argue, but then hesitated. In the end, he only shook his head. If that's your choice, he turned to the door, pausing just before stepping out. Be gone before I change my mind. Vanessa felt her heart shatter. She bent down, carefully lifting her babies into her arms, holding them close. Then, without looking back, she stepped out of the house she had once called home, the place that had once been her sanctuary. Outside, the night air was bitterly cold. The iron gates slammed shut behind her, severing everything she had ever known. And Vanessa knew that from this moment on, she had only one option: to survive. She had no home, no money, no place to go. She could have gone back to the apartment she had lived in before marrying Warren, but that had been sold long ago. She could have called her friends, but after marrying into the Kensington family, she had slowly lost touch with those she once held dear. Her world had once been Warren Kensington, and now that world had slammed its doors shut. Vanessa took a deep breath. She didn't have time to break down. A shelter. She needed a place to stay. The first hotel she found wasn't luxurious, but looked safe enough. She approached the front desk, desperation laced in her voice. I need a room, just for one night. The receptionist, a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed uniform, glanced up at her. His gaze flickered from his sleeping babies in her arms to the rumpled clothes she wore. Do you have a reservation? His tone was flat and indifferent. No, but I can pay in cash, she said quickly, pulling out what little money she had left. The man frowned, his eyes moving between the bills in her hand and her face, filled with skepticism. I'm sorry, but we're fully booked. Vanessa froze. The lobby was nearly empty. The parking lot outside was far from full. She knew exactly why she was being turned away. Please, she pleaded, trying to keep her voice steady. I just need a place for the night. Just one night. I have infants with me. We have no rooms available, the man repeated, this time with finality. Vanessa clenched her fists. She had no choice but to turn away. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be truly abandoned by society. She tried renting a cheap room at a boarding house. The landlady, an older woman, initially seemed friendly. But the moment Vanessa handed over her identification, her expression darkened. Kensington, the woman narrowed her eyes. Are you related to Warren Kensington? Vanessa swallowed hard. I'm his ex-wife. The words had barely left her lips before the landlady's demeanor shifted completely. I'm sorry, but I can't rent to you. Vanessa's eyes widened. Why? The woman avoided her gaze. I don't want trouble. Warren Kensington may be a powerful businessman, but everyone knows he doesn't let go of what he considers his. I don't want to get involved. Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but she knew nothing she said would change the woman's mind. Stepping back into the cold night, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. She hadn't just lost her home. She had lost her place in society. Night fell, the wind whispering through the empty streets. Vanessa curled up on a lonely bus stop bench, cradling her babies tightly against her chest. Zion stirred, his tiny eyes fluttering open to meet hers. Go back to sleep, sweetheart, she whispered, gently patting his back as if the rhythmic motion could shield them from the cruelty of the world. For the first time in years, she felt utterly powerless. Tears welled up, slipping silently down her cheeks. She couldn't go on like this. She couldn't let her children grow up on the streets. But where else could she go? Then, suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat as she glanced at the screen. Sienna. Vanessa's pulse quickened. Sienna was the only friend who had stayed in touch after she married Warren. If there was anyone in the world who might help her, it was Sienna. Her hands trembled as she answered the call. Vanessa. Sienna's voice was filled with worry. Where are you? Just that one question, so simple, so full of concern, was enough to break Vanessa completely. Her voice cracked as she whispered, Sienna, I have nowhere to go. Less than 30 minutes later, a car pulled up in front of the bus stop. Sienna rushed out, wrapping her coat tighter around herself as she ran toward Vanessa. Oh my God, Vanessa, what happened? Her voice trembled as she took in the sight of her friend, disheveled, exhausted, clutching two sleeping infants. Vanessa couldn't answer. She was too drained, too worn down. Sienna didn't press for details. Instead, she reached out, her touch warm and steady. Come with me, she said firmly. Vanessa looked up at her. Gratitude filled her eyes. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Vanessa had a roof over her head. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't grand, but it was warm, and in the quiet darkness, she made a silent vow. I will not break. Not now. Not ever. Vanessa once had it all. A powerful husband, a lavish home, a future most people could only dream of. But now, all she had were her 2 children and a life that no longer belonged to her. The first few days after Warren cast her out were the darkest she had ever known. She grappled with fears she had never faced before. The fear of hunger, the fear of having no shelter, the fear that she wouldn't be able to protect her children. But when the shock faded, a single thought consumed her. She had to rise. She had to be stronger. She had to rebuild her life. The first job she found was as a morning cleaner at a small restaurant. Every day, she woke at 4 a.m., dropped her children off with Sienna, and rushed to work. She scrubbed floors, washed dishes, cleaned kitchens. It was grueling, exhausting work, but at least it put food on the table. Still, she knew this couldn't be her future. Cleaning could sustain her for now, but it wouldn't give her the independence, the strength, or the dignity she needed to reclaim her life. That was when she remembered the dream she had abandoned long ago, becoming a psychologist. Before marrying Warren, Vanessa had studied psychology. She had loved helping people, listening to their pain, finding ways to guide them toward healing. But after their marriage, Warren hadn't wanted her to work. He had wanted a perfect wife, a woman devoted entirely to their home and his status. She had surrendered her ambitions to become Mrs. Kensington, a woman who lived in her husband's shadow. Now that she was no longer Mrs. Kensington, she would take back what was hers. Vanessa began searching for ways to return to school, but studying as a single mother was nearly impossible. Tuition was an insurmountable obstacle. She no longer had access to the joint bank accounts she once shared with Warren. She had no savings, no financial safety net. The prestigious universities she had once considered were now far beyond her reach. But she refused to give up. She researched every possible option: scholarships for single mothers, government assistance programs, free online courses to rebuild her knowledge. By day, she worked. By night, after her children were asleep, she sat at the table with her books, taking notes, watching online lectures. Every night, when the clock struck 2 a.m., she would glance at her reflection in the mirror, exhausted, dark circles shadowing her eyes. But inside her, a fire burned. She wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it for her children. 6 months later, she secured an unpaid internship at a community mental health center. There was no salary, but she didn't care. It was a chance, a foot in the door. The work was anything but easy. Every day, she met people burdened by unimaginable pain, survivors of domestic abuse, those battling depression, abandoned children. When she looked at them, she saw herself, and that only strengthened her resolve. The director of the center, Rosa, was a sharp-eyed, formidable woman with years of experience. At their first meeting, she studied Vanessa intently before asking, "What makes you think you're suited for this work?" Vanessa clenched her fists. "I know what it means to be broken," she answered, her voice steady. "I know what it means to be abandoned, to be cast aside, to have the world turn its back on you. I haven't just studied psychology, I have lived it, and I want to help people who are drowning in the same darkness I once did." Rosa was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then prove it." The months that followed were brutal. Vanessa worked at the center by day, studied by night. At first, she was only allowed to observe, taking notes, assisting with minor tasks. But little by little, Rosa began entrusting her with more responsibility, helping patients with mild cases, sitting in on group therapy sessions. She learned to listen, not just to words, but to the silence between them. She learned to look into someone's eyes and recognize the unspoken screams buried beneath. She learned how to use words, not as mere conversation, but as a lifeline. And slowly, she realized she was no longer the woman Warren Kensington had abandoned. She was becoming something else, someone stronger, someone who had value, not because of the man she had married, but because of the person she had fought to become. The day she received an acceptance letter for a master's program in psychology, she cried, not from pain, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. She was stepping out of the shadows. She was rebuilding her future. And this time, no one would take it from her. 15 years later, the morning sunlight streamed through the glass window, casting a soft glow over the thick textbooks stacked neatly on the desk. Vanessa Aldridge let out a slow breath and closed her notebook. Leaning back in her chair, she pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the familiar exhaustion that came after another long night of work. Her small office was nestled inside the community counseling center, a place where she had spent over a decade helping lost souls find their way again. She had witnessed countless stories of pain, but none hurt as much as watching her own son struggle against the injustices of the world. Vanessa's gaze drifted to the framed photo on her desk. A strong mother and her 2 teenage sons, Zion and Cairo Aldridge. Her boys, the 2 pieces of her soul that God had entrusted her to protect. But sometimes she wondered if she had protected them enough. The sharp crack of a baseball bat echoed across the field, the ball soaring high into the sky, spinning toward the outfield. Zion Aldridge dropped the bat and sprinted around the bases, power surging through his veins. He loved this game. He was born for this. The team erupted in cheers. A perfect home run. But as Zion stepped toward his coach, a voice cut through the celebration, yanking him back to reality. "Nice hit, Zion, but we need to preserve the team's traditional image." The words stabbed him like a knife. His fist clenched, his eyes darkening with anger. How many times had he heard this before? What did traditional image even mean? That there was no place for someone like him in the National League? He had proven himself over and over again. But sometimes talent wasn't enough. And that made him hate this world. In a dimly lit room bathed in the glow of golden lamps, Cairo Aldrich gently drew his bow across the strings of his violin, the notes floating into the air like whispered prayers. Every time he played, he felt touched by something divine. Music was his sanctuary, but the world refused to leave him in peace. You should try hip-hop instead of the violin. Cairo blinked, glancing at his music teacher in confusion. What do you mean? The older man hesitated before forcing a polite smile. I just mean, you have rhythm in your blood, Cairo. But the violin, it's not exactly your thing. Not his thing. Because of who he was? Because of the color of his skin? Cairo swallowed his frustration and said nothing. He had heard comments like this too many times. But that didn't mean they didn't hurt. Zion burned with rage. He wanted to fight back, to break down the invisible barriers the world kept placing in front of him. Cairo was quieter. He buried his emotions, telling himself that music would be enough to get him through. Two brothers, two different ways of surviving. But one question remained, like an unhealed wound. Why has our father never looked for us? When they were younger, they had asked Vanessa this question more times than she could count. She had always smiled, brushing their hair gently as she whispered, "You have me, and I will never leave you." But now at 15, they understood. There were some voids in life that even a mother's strength could not fill. Meanwhile, in a distant part of the world, a man battled the fragments of his own memories. Warren Kensington lay in a private hospital room, bathed in the sterile glow of white fluorescent light. His once proud face was marred with old scars, reminders of the car accident that had nearly taken his life. He had survived, but his memories had not. He remembered his name. He remembered his empire, the numbers, the extravagant parties. But there was a hole in his past, one he couldn't seem to reach. And then there were the dreams. A woman screaming, two children crying in the dark, a door slamming shut. The images haunted him, but he didn't know who they were. His doctors told him he needed a psychologist to help him recover his lost memories. And fate had already decided. The name of the specialist assigned to his case? Vanessa Aldrich. Vanessa stood in the doorway of the living room, watching her sons in silence. Zion sat on the couch, eyes fixed on the television screen, but it was obvious he wasn't paying attention. Cairo leaned against the window, headphones in his ears, but his fingers drummed absently against his knee. She knew what they were thinking. It wasn't the first time, but it never got easier. Today was their 15th birthday, a day that should have been filled with joy, yet carried a void none of them could ignore. No gift from their father, no phone call, no birthday wish. Just like the past 15 years, Zion was the first to break the silence. He shut the television off with a sharp click, tossed the remote aside, and got up, pacing the room like a caged lion. "Mom, I have a question." His voice was cold. Vanessa took a deep breath. "I'm listening, Zion." He turned to face her, his eyes burning with years of suppressed anger. "Does our father even know we exist?" Her heart clenched. "Zion, yes or no?" His voice was sharp, demanding. Vanessa swallowed hard before answering, "Yes." Zion let out a bitter laugh. "Then why has he never looked for us? Why have we been invisible to him for 15 years? Cairo pulled off his headphones and spoke quietly. "Maybe he never wanted us in the first place." Zion's head snapped toward his brother, his eyes narrowing. "Are you defending it?" Cairo shook his head, his expression unreadable, but his voice carried an undeniable weight. "No, I'm just stating the truth." Vanessa sighed and patted the seat beside her. "Sit down, both of you." Zion crossed his arms, clearly frustrated, but eventually sat. Cairo followed, quiet as always. She looked at them, her two boys, the soul she had poured every ounce of her love and sacrifice into. But there were wounds even a mother's love couldn't heal. "You think your father doesn't care about you, don't you?" Her voice was gentle but firm. Zion let out a hollow chuckle. "We don't think it, Mom. We know it." Cairo said nothing, but the look in his eyes echoed the same sentiment. Vanessa clasped her hands together, as if searching for strength. "Your father wasn't always the man he is today," she said, her gaze distant. "He was raised with rigid beliefs, and maybe that blinded him from seeing things with his heart. But no matter what, he is still your father." Zion let out a sharp exhale, shaking his head. Our father, he scoffed. A father who never once looked for us, never once called, never once sent so much as a birthday card. A father like that isn't worth caring about. Vanessa knew Zion's anger was justified, but she also knew that beneath that rage was something far more painful, the hurt of being abandoned. No matter how much he denied it, he had longed for his father's recognition. Then Cairo spoke, his voice softer but no less cutting. I'm not angry like Zion, he admitted, looking up at her. But I don't care either. We've done just fine without him. So why should we even think about him? Vanessa looked into her son's eyes, and what she saw there frightened her more than Zion's fury, indifference. Zion's anger meant he still felt something. But Cairo had taught himself not to need his father's love. He had trained his heart to be indifferent, and that hurt Vanessa more than anything. That night, after her sons had fallen asleep, Vanessa knelt by her bed, hands clasped tightly in prayer. Lord, please guide us. Give my sons the strength to overcome these wounds. Help them find peace so their hearts do not turn stone. She felt tears slip down her hands, but she didn't wipe them away. Being a mother had never been easy. She had done everything she could to give her sons love, to fill the emptiness left behind by their father. But was it enough? Would Zion ever stop resenting his father? Would Cairo ever let his heart open again? Vanessa didn't know, but she believed in God's plan, and she had no choice but to trust in it. Across the city, in the sterile darkness of a private hospital room, a man battled with the broken fragments of his past. Warren Kensington jolted awake, his forehead damp with sweat. Another dream. This time, it was clearer. A woman, her face twisted in sorrow, holding two crying children. She screamed something, but her voice was muffled, as if an invisible wall separated them. The children wailed. A door slammed shut. Warren clenched his fists. Why did these images keep haunting him? Who were they? He pressed his hands to his temples. The pounding in his skull was unbearable. Then, he remembered what the doctors had told him. There's a psychologist who might be able to help restore your memory. And there, printed on the paper in front of him, was a name that sent an unfamiliar chill down his spine. Vanessa Aldrich. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled his lungs. The pale white glow of hospital lights cast long shadows across the ceiling. Warren Kensington blinked, a dull ache radiating from his temples down to the base of his neck. His body felt heavy, as if he had just woken from a restless, suffocating sleep. He had no idea how long he had been lying there. When he tried to sit up, a sharp pain shot through his body, forcing him back against the pillows. A voice spoke beside him. You're awake, Mr. Kensington. He turned his head, finding an older man in a crisp white coat studying him with quiet scrutiny. Warren swallowed, his voice dry and hoarse. Where am I? St. Clair Private Hospital. You were in a serious car accident. A car accident? A wave of confusion washed over him, but beyond the vague knowledge of an impact, his mind was blank. How long have I been here? 3 weeks. Warren fell silent, letting the information sink in. Something told him there was someone he should remember, something important. But when he reached into his mind, all he found was a terrifying emptiness. He closed his eyes, searching for the missing pieces. And then they came. Flashes. A woman sobbing in anguish. 2 children crying in the dark. A door slamming shut. The sound of their cries fading into nothing. Warren's eyes snapped open. He sucked in a sharp breath as if waking from a nightmare. But the nightmare didn't fade. The images lingered, haunting him, playing over and over in his mind, like a cruel whisper from a past he couldn't grasp. But he didn't remember. The dreams continued to torment him in the following days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. A woman with sorrow in her eyes, her face streaked with tears. He couldn't hear her voice, but he could feel her pain. Then there were the children. Small, trembling, reaching out for something or someone. And always the door, closing, locking them away. Every time Warren woke up, his chest felt hollow. A strange, unbearable grief pressed against his ribs. But he didn't know why. His doctor, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s, listened carefully as Warren recounted the visions that haunted him. "It's possible you've repressed certain memories," the doctor said thoughtfully. "The trauma from the accident may have triggered a defensive mechanism in your brain, making you forget specific events." Warren's jaw tightened. "So what do you suggest?" The doctor slid a sheet of paper across the table. "There's a psychologist who specializes in cases like yours. I believe she's your best chance at recovering your memory." Warren picked up the paper. The moment his eyes landed on the name, his body tensed. Vanessa Aldridge. The name echoed in his mind, stirring something deep and unfamiliar. Something important. He closed his eyes, searching for recognition, but all he found was an overwhelming sense of unease. Who was she? Why did her name make his chest tighten? "She has experience treating patients with selective memory loss," the doctor continued. "I believe she's the right person to help you." Warren gripped the paper tightly. He despised feeling powerless. His entire life had been built on control. Numbers, negotiations, decisions that shaped empires. He had never let anything slip beyond his reach. And now, he couldn't even control his own memories. Unacceptable. He took a slow, steady breath. "Fine," he said. "Set up a meeting." The counseling center was nothing like the places Warren was used to. There were no towering skyscrapers, no luxury cars lining the streets. No one here knew his name. As he stepped inside, the air felt different, calmer, quieter. A far cry from the fast-paced, cutthroat world he had once dominated. A receptionist led him down a hallway, stopping in front of a modest office. "Dr. Aldridge will see you now." Warren nodded, but unease stirred in his chest. He stepped inside. The woman behind the desk looked up. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something inside Warren shifted violently. His heart pounded, his breath caught in his throat. He didn't understand why, but Vanessa did, because the man standing before her, the one looking at her like a stranger, was the same man who had abandoned her and their children, and he didn't even remember doing it. The therapy room was so silent that Warren could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. He sat across from Vanessa, his hands clenched over his knees. A strange sensation crawled through him, something between familiarity and distance. The woman before him was not just a psychologist. He knew, deep down, that she was more than that. But who was she? And why did just looking into her eyes make his chest tighten with an unfamiliar pain? Vanessa remained composed, but beneath the table, her fingers curled into her palm. She was fighting an internal battle. Should she tell him the truth right now? No. She wanted him to find the answers himself. "We're going to try an exercise today, Warren," she said calmly. "I want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the first images come to your mind." Warren hesitated for a moment before slowly closing his eyes. Darkness. Then, piece by piece, scattered fragments began to emerge. A woman stood before him. She was beautiful, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. Tears streamed down her face, her voice choked with anger and despair. "They're your children, Warren. You cannot deny the truth." Warren's brow furrowed. "What do you see?" Vanessa's voice was soft, measured. I see a woman," he murmured, his voice uncertain. "She's crying. She's angry at me. Do you recognize her?" Warren strained to focus, but her face remained blurred. "No, but I feel like..." He hesitated, searching for the words. "I feel like I hurt her." Vanessa clenched her hands tighter beneath the table. Yes, he had destroyed her, but she kept her voice steady. "Keep going, Warren. What else do you see?" The vision shifted. A dimly lit room. 2 small children, still so young, cradled in the woman's arms. The sound of their cries echoed in the air. A door opened. He saw himself walking in, but instead of joy, his face was ice. Then his own voice rang out, cold, merciless. "They cannot be mine." Warren's eyes flew open, his entire body rigid. "No," he whispered hoarsely. That can't be true. Are you remembering something?" Vanessa asked, her voice controlled but tense. Warren pressed his hands against his temples, his breathing uneven. 2 children. I saw 2 children. I told her they weren't mine." Vanessa held his gaze, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The pieces were finally falling into place. But was Warren truly ready to face the truth? He looked up, his eyes dark with something Vanessa couldn't quite name. "Vanessa," he said slowly, testing the name on his tongue. "You're the woman in my dreams, aren't you?" Her heart pounded, but her voice remained even. "What do you think?" Warren closed his eyes again, this time without her guidance. And the memories came flooding back. A marriage, the happiness they once shared, the doubt, the fury, a door slamming shut in the middle of the night, a woman standing in the darkness, holding two children, his children. He had been the one to cast them out. Cold sweat formed on Warren's brow. He opened his eyes, his body frozen in place. "Dear God," he whispered, his voice thick with shock. "What have I done?" Vanessa watched him carefully, the faintest flicker of old pain in her eyes. "Do you remember now, Warren?" Her voice was low, steady. He couldn't answer. The emotions crashing through him, shock, regret, anguish, left him momentarily paralyzed. He wasn't just a man recovering lost memories. He was a man standing face to face with the greatest sin of his life. Warren inhaled sharply, as if trying to steady himself. "Vanessa," his voice cracked. I have children." A quiet, aching pause. Then, finally, Vanessa nodded. "You have two sons," she said slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Zion and Cairo Aldridge." Warren's eyes widened, his face going pale. Those names, they were no longer just names. They were a part of him. And for 15 years, he had let them grow up without knowing they existed. A tremor ran through his body. Where are they?" Vanessa crossed her arms, studying him for a long moment. Then, her voice turned cold. "They grew up without a father." Her words were razor sharp. "And now they don't need one." Warren felt the invisible blade cut deep into his chest. He had spent years forgetting them. Now, he would have to fight to earn them back. The icy winter wind howled through the streets of New York, carrying a bitter chill that cut through the air. Inside a small cafe tucked away in Brooklyn, Warren Kensington sat motionless in a leather chair, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He still couldn't believe it. After all these years, he had just learned that he had two sons. Zion, Cairo. The names echoed in his mind like a relentless, painful reminder. Across from him, Vanessa sat with an air of quiet composure. Her eyes, once warm, once familiar, were now cold as steel. "You want to meet them?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. Warren lifted his gaze to her. "Yes." Vanessa took a slow sip of tea. "And you think it's that simple?" Warren inhaled deeply, as if trying to steady the storm inside him. "I know I was wrong. I can't change the past, but I want to make things right." Vanessa studied him for a long moment. "Make things right?" she echoed. "Do you think you can just walk back into their lives and fix everything? Do you have any idea what it was like for them? Growing up without a father, being rejected by society, carrying the weight of a man who was supposed to protect them, but instead abandoned them." Her voice wasn't raised, but the weight of her words struck him like a blow to the chest. "Vanessa," his voice wavered. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I just want a chance." Vanessa exhaled softly and placed her cup down. "Fine," she said, "but you should prepare yourself. They're not the innocent boys you left behind. They learned how to live without you." Warren nodded, though deep inside, he wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay ahead. Vanessa arranged the meeting at a park on a quiet Saturday afternoon. She didn't tell Zion and Cairo who they were about to meet. She only said, "There's someone I want you to meet." Zion shot a glance at Cairo. "Mom's dating again?" Cairo shrugged, uninterested. "Who knows?" But when they reached the bench where Vanessa sat waiting, they froze at the sight of the man beside her. Warren rose to his feet, his heart hammering as his eyes landed on the two young men standing before him. They were tall, strong, both carrying an intensity in their gaze that was hauntingly familiar. They had his stance, but their eyes belonged to their mother. Eyes that had learned how to exist in a world that didn't make room for them. Zion was the first to break the silence. "Who is this?" he asked, suspicion thick in his voice. Vanessa took a breath before saying, "This is your father." The air between them grew unbearably still. Cairo stood frozen, but Zion didn't. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Father," he scoffed, "you mean the man who disappeared for 15 years and now thinks he can just show up and pretend everything is fine?" Cairo remained silent, but his hands clenched at his sides. Warren's throat went dry. He wanted to say something, anything, but where could he even begin? "I know I failed you," he finally managed, his voice rough with regret. "I have no excuse, but I want a chance to make things right." Zion arched a brow and turned to Vanessa. "Are you serious, Mom? You really think we need him?" Vanessa's expression softened with the slightest trace of sorrow. "I'm not asking you to accept anything, Zion. I just think you deserve to know the truth." For the first time, Cairo spoke. His voice was calm, but razor sharp. "The truth." He met Warren's gaze. "The truth is you left us. The truth is you never looked for us. The truth is, now that you've gotten your memories back, you think we'll just welcome you with open arms." Warren had no answer, because there were no words that could erase what he had done. But he wasn't going to walk away. Not again. "I know I can't change the past," he said, locking eyes with them both. "But I don't want to lose the future." Zion crossed his arms, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "Then prove it." There it was, the challenge. Warren recognized something in Zion's tone, something all too familiar. Pride, defiance, strength. His son was more like him than he realized. "Ow," Warren asked. Zion smirked, but there was no amusement in it. "You weren't there when we grew up. So if you really want to be a father, start from the basics." Cairo's voice was softer, but his words held weight. "Come to my violin recital." Zion added, "and come to my baseball game." They weren't just invitations. They were tests. If Warren truly wanted to step into their lives, he had to prove he deserved it. Warren understood that. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about billion-dollar deals or reputation or legacy. He was only thinking about one thing: how to earn back his sons. He met their gazes and nodded. "I'll be there." Vanessa watched them carefully, feeling a breeze stir through the air. She didn't know if Warren could do this, but she did know one thing: God never placed people in our lives without a reason. And perhaps this was the test for both Warren and herself. Warren Kensington had never been a man who understood the meaning of waiting. His entire life, things had come easily to him: money, power, respect. But now, facing the two sons he had abandoned, he realized that some things could never be bought, and trust was one of them. Zion and Cairo had allowed him to enter their world, but that didn't mean they accepted him. And Warren felt that truth like a weight pressing against his chest. 2 weeks had passed since he had stepped back into their lives. But aside from the baseball game and the violin recital, he had received no response from them. Zion didn't text him. Cairo didn't call. He had tried reaching out. "Zion, how's practice going?" "Cairo, can I come listen to you play again?" No reply. If Warren were any other man, he might have given up, but this time he couldn't. That afternoon, Warren made a decision he had never made before. He went to find Zion at practice. The baseball field was mostly empty, with only a few players packing up their gear. In the far corner, Warren spotted Zion, his shirt damp with sweat, gripping his bat tightly. Warren approached, but before he could speak, Zion had already noticed him. "What are you doing here?" Zion asked, his voice laced with irritation. Warren stopped a few feet away, inhaling deeply. "I wanted to see you practice." Zion let out a short, bitter laugh. "Watch me practice? That's rich. You think just showing up makes you my father?" Warren steadied himself. "I know it's not that simple, but I want to understand you, to know what matters to you." Zion's grip on the bat tightened, his eyes flashing with something raw and unforgiving. "If you really wanted to understand me," he said coldly, "you wouldn't have thrown my mother out in the middle of the night with 2 newborns in her arms." Warren froze. Even though his memories had returned, hearing those words come from his son's mouth hurt more than any punch he had ever taken. "Zion, I know I was wrong," Warren said, his voice rough with regret. "I can't change what happened, but I can change the present. I can change the future." Zion stared at him for a long moment before shaking his head. "I'm not sure I want you in my future." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Warren standing alone on the field. Warren didn't chase after him. He knew he couldn't force this, but the distance between them hurt more than he had expected. If Zion's response was anger, Cairo's was something else entirely. Indifference. He didn't lash out. He didn't argue. He just kept his distance. Warren had tried reaching out to him, asking about his music, showing interest in his passions. But Cairo's replies were always the same. I'm fine. The violin is fine. You don't have to come. No emotion. No invitation. The only time Warren managed to see him in person was by pure chance, when they crossed paths on the way home one evening. Cairo, Warren called out, approaching carefully. Cairo stopped, pulling out his headphones. What? Warren had 100 things he wanted to say, but in the end, all he managed was, "Can I walk with you?" Cairo studied him for a moment before shrugging. "If you want." They walked in silence. Warren could feel the invisible wall between them, the one he had built over 15 years of absence. At the next intersection, Cairo stopped. "Listen," he said, staring straight ahead. "I don't hate you. I don't have enough feelings toward you to hate you." Warren stiffened. "But I also don't know if I can ever accept you." Warren looked at his son, feeling a deep, sinking weight in his chest. "Cairo, what can I do to make you trust me?" Cairo turned to him, his expression unreadable. "You can't change what happened." His voice was quiet but sharp. "So give me a reason to believe you won't leave us again." Then he slipped his headphones back in and walked away, leaving Warren standing in the middle of a crowded street, utterly alone. That night, Warren sat in his luxurious apartment, staring at his phone. No texts, no calls. It was as if he were still a stranger in their lives. For the first time in his life, Warren understood what it meant to be powerless. And in that moment, he realized this was the price of his past sins. He exhaled slowly. He couldn't expect instant forgiveness. He couldn't force Zion and Cairo to open their hearts to him. But he could be patient. And so, he made a decision. No matter how long it took, no matter what he had to do, he would not give up. Warren Kensington had once believed that the greatest battles of his life were fought in the corporate world, where power-hungry executives would stop at nothing to bring their rivals down. But he had been wrong. The hardest fight wasn't in billion-dollar negotiations or hostile takeovers. It was in the hearts of two 15-year-old boys who didn't need him. And as he tried to mend what he had broken, he realized that the world he once ruled had turned its back on him. One cold morning, Warren's phone buzzed with an urgent call from his most trusted assistant, Richard. "Sir, we have a problem." Richard's voice was tense. Warren frowned. "What is it?" "The media got hold of your personal life." A sharp unease crept up Warren's spine. "What do you mean?" Richard sighed. "They ran a story about your secret children, about your connection to Dr. Vanessa Aldridge, and the past allegations that you abandoned your family." Warren gripped the phone tighter, striding toward his desk as he pulled open his laptop. On the front page of one of New York's biggest financial newspapers, a bold headline stood out. "Warren Kensington, visionary businessman or heartless father." Below it were carefully selected images. One of him leaving Vanessa's clinic, another of Zion on the baseball field, and a third of Cairo standing on stage, violin in hand. A story designed to destroy him. Within 24 hours, Warren received an urgent summons from the Kensington Corporation's board of directors. In the boardroom, Warren sat across from the very men who had once been his greatest allies. Now, they regarded him with cold skepticism. Raymond Hargrove, a senior board member with undeniable influence, placed the newspaper on the table and stared at Warren. "We need you to explain this," he said, his voice measured but firm. Warren kept his expression unreadable. "Explain what exactly?" Raymond raised a brow. "The scandal, Warren. This affects the company's image. We cannot afford to be entangled in a personal controversy of this magnitude." Another board member spoke up. "Stock prices are slipping. Investors are growing uneasy." Warren glanced around the room. These men had once respected him, admired him, but they didn't care about whether he was truly trying to fix his past. They only cared about profit. "So what do you want me to do?" Warren asked, his voice cool. Raymond clasped his hands together, his gaze razor sharp. "We need you to deny the story. Or, at the very least, distance yourself from Vanessa Aldridge and her children." The company's reputation is at stake. A slow, burning anger simmered in Warren's chest. Once upon a time, he would have done it without hesitation. He would have chosen his empire over everything else. But not this time. Not again. No, Warren said, his voice unwavering. Raymond's expression darkened. Are you certain? Absolutely. Warren leaned forward, his palms pressing against the polished table. I've made mistakes before. I won't make another one just to protect a corporate image. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Raymond sighed and shook his head. If that's your decision, then the board has no choice. A sinking feeling settled in Warren's gut. What do you mean? Raymond's lips pressed into a thin line. A vote of no confidence will be held next week. If you fail to regain the trust of our investors, you will be removed as CEO. The news spread fast. Investors pulled back. Business partners hesitated. One by one, Warren's old allies abandoned him. A week later, at the board meeting, the vote was cast. The verdict was final. Warren Kensington was removed as CEO of the company he had built. His empire crumbled in an instant. That evening, Warren sat alone in his lavish apartment. No calls, no messages, no one checking in on him. He looked around at the vast, luxurious space, but it felt emptier than ever before. Just like him, for the first time in his life, Warren truly understood what it felt like to be abandoned. No friends, no career, no power, nothing left but regret. And worst of all, was it already too late to reclaim his family? Warren Kensington once believed that power could shield him from his mistakes. But now, as everything crumbled, his career, his reputation, he faced a bitter truth. Nothing in the world could erase the pain he had inflicted on Vanessa and their sons. That didn't mean he wouldn't try. For the first time in his life, Warren made a decision he never thought he would. He would stand before the world and admit his sins. After losing control of Kensington Corporation, Warren realized he had nothing left to lose. But he still had one final chance to do the right thing. After nights of restless contemplation, he picked up the phone and called Richard, his former assistant. Richard, Warren said, his voice steady. I want to hold a press conference. There was a long silence on the other end before Richard finally spoke. Are you sure? A press conference could make things worse. Warren exhaled. I've been making things worse for 15 years. It's time to face it. Richard sighed. What do you plan to say? Warren closed his eyes, picturing Vanessa's face. Zion's anger. Cairo's silence. The pain in their eyes. I want to apologize, he said. I want the world to know I failed, and I will spend the rest of my life making it right. Richard hesitated before responding. I'll make the arrangements. A week later, the entire New York press corps turned its attention to Warren Kensington's unexpected press conference. Reporters speculated that he would announce a new venture, a business move to reclaim his place in the corporate world. No one expected him to stand before hundreds of cameras and confess his greatest failure. As he stepped onto the stage, the flashes of cameras lit up the room. The air was thick with tension. He scanned the crowd, then looked directly into the cameras broadcasting live to millions. He could imagine Vanessa watching from afar. Zion and Cairo, too. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the microphone. Thank you all for being here today, he began, his voice firm yet weighted. Many have questioned my departure from Kensington Corporation. But I'm not here to talk about business. I am here to talk about a mistake I have carried for 15 years. The room fell into a hush. I once had a family, he continued. A remarkable woman. 2 sons I should have protected at all costs. But I didn't. A few reporters exchanged glances, some scribbling furiously in their notepads. Warren's voice grew thick with emotion. Because of arrogance, because of prejudice, I turned my back on my own children. I cast out the woman I once loved, forcing her to raise them alone when she should have never had to. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. But Warren didn't care. He wasn't here to salvage his image. He was here to tell the truth. I know an apology will never be enough, Warren said, looking straight into the camera. But I will say it anyway, to Vanessa, to Zion, to Cairo. He paused, swallowing hard. Vanessa, I hurt you more than anyone else ever could. You carried the burden of my failure, faced a cruel world alone because I was too blind to see the truth. No words can erase the pain I caused. But if there is even the smallest chance, I hope to make amends. Not with words, but with actions. His grip on the podium tightened. Zion, you are strong, resilient. I have no right to be proud of you because I was never there. But I hope one day I can earn that right. Cairo, you have the soul of an artist. You poured your pain into music, and I have heard it. I don't know if I can ever heal the wounds I caused, but I will never walk away again. Silence blanketed the room. No questions, no cutting remarks from the press. Just a man laying his soul bare. The headlines exploded within hours. Warren Kensington publicly admits to abandoning his family. From business titan to a man who lost everything, Warren Kensington's road to redemption. Is an apology enough? Public divided over Warren Kensington's confession. Some called it a calculated move to regain favor. But others, those who knew the pain of being forgotten, saw something different. Most importantly, Vanessa, Zion, and Cairo had heard him. Would they accept it? That remained to be seen. But at least Warren had done the one thing he should have done 15 years ago. He had told the truth. Late at night, Vanessa sat alone in the living room, the glow of the television casting flickering shadows across her face. On the screen, Warren Kensington's image was crisp and clear, still the same man, still in his perfectly tailored suit, still with that deep, commanding voice. But for the first time in 15 years, that voice was no longer sharp, no longer cold. Vanessa, I hurt you more than anyone. I wasn't there when you needed me most. I can't change the past, but I can change the present. Vanessa pressed the remote. The screen went dark. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. In the darkness, she closed her eyes. Was this apology real? She couldn't deny that Warren had changed. But what did change truly mean? Was it just a moment of guilt, a fleeting realization, or had something inside him shifted for good? 15 years ago, after being cast out in the dead of night, she had vowed never to let Warren Kensington hurt her again. But now, could she believe that the man standing before the world, confessing his sins, was truly different? Vanessa sighed and pressed her fingertips against her temples. She didn't know the answer. What she did know was that Zion and Cairo had seen the press conference too, and they were likely struggling with their own feelings. Zion slammed his bedroom door shut. He threw his phone onto the bed, pacing furiously. He had watched the entire press conference, and he didn't believe a single word of it. Standing before the mirror, he stared at his own reflection. 15 years. 15 years with no calls, no effort, no search for the sons he abandoned. And now, after losing everything, Warren suddenly wanted to be a father? Zion clenched his fists, rage boiling inside him. If Warren thought a public apology would be enough to make Zion open his heart, then he was a fool. There was only one thing Zion believed in: actions. And until Warren proved, through actions, not words, that he had changed, Zion had no reason to call him father. Cairo sat by the window, staring out into the quiet night. He had watched the press conference too, but unlike Zion, he didn't feel anger, only a strange emptiness. He thought about the music he had written, the same piece Warren had once come to hear. Back then, Cairo hadn't thought much about it. But looking back, he wondered, why had Warren been there? No one forced him to come. No one told him to listen. But he had. Cairo had spent his whole life protecting himself from disappointment. He had taught himself not to expect anything from anyone. But deep down, a small part of him wanted to believe in Warren. Not because Warren had earned it, but because Cairo wanted to know what it felt like to have a father. Could Warren be that person? Cairo didn't know, but he did know one thing. If Warren truly wanted to be in his life, he had to accept that Cairo wasn't someone who forgave easily. The next morning, the kitchen was quiet. Vanessa stirred her coffee absently. Zion idly tapped his spoon against his cereal bowl, and Cairo scrolled through his phone. No one spoke, but the press conference lingered in the air between them. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. "What do you think?" Zion smirked. "About what?" Vanessa met his gaze. "About Warren." Zion let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Do you really want my answer?" Vanessa nodded. Zion set his spoon down, crossing his arms. I think it was a performance. A well-crafted show. When people lose everything, they'll say whatever they need to say to get sympathy. Cairo remained silent. Vanessa turned to him. And you? Cairo glanced down, his fingers hovering over his phone screen. After a moment, he spoke. I don't know. Zion frowned. You don't know? You're seriously considering this? Cairo shrugged. I just know that if he really has changed, we'll see it. Vanessa studied her sons, her heart heavy. Zion had slammed the door shut. Cairo had left it slightly open. And her? She wasn't ready to give an answer yet. But one thing was certain. Forgiveness didn't come in a day. If Warren truly wanted to be in their lives, he had to accept the long, difficult road ahead. And only time would prove if he was worthy of it. Warren Kensington had lost everything. His company, his reputation, his status, and the perfect image he had spent a lifetime building. But there was one thing he hadn't lost. A chance to be a father. It was fragile, barely within reach. But it was still there, and he was willing to do whatever it took to hold on to it. With no company to run, Warren was forced to confront a question he had never considered before. Who was he without Kensington Industries? For the first time in years, his mornings were empty. No back-to-back meetings. No urgent calls from shareholders. No billion-dollar deals waiting on his approval. His penthouse, once a symbol of his success, now felt vast and eerily silent. Every morning, he woke up with nothing to do, and that terrified him more than losing his fortune ever could. One late afternoon, as Warren stood by the window, staring blankly at the city skyline, his phone rang. Vanessa. He answered immediately. Vanessa. Her voice was calm. Are you free? He froze for a moment. This, coming from Vanessa, was unexpected. Yes. His response was quick, almost desperate. Is something wrong? A brief silence. Then, I need your help. Warren frowned. With what? Do you remember the counseling center where I work? Yes. They need a financial advisor. Someone who can manage the funding for single mothers and at-risk children. Another pause. I think you could do it. Warren stiffened. His entire career had been built around corporations, high-stakes investments, and numbers that carried weight in billions. And now, Vanessa was asking him to help a small nonprofit, a place where numbers weren't measured in profit margins, but in lives changed. But he knew why she was asking. Single mothers, abandoned children. It was a reflection of Vanessa, Zion, and Cairo 15 years ago. Warren inhaled deeply. I'll do it. A different world. The first time Warren stepped into the counseling center, he felt like an outsider. No luxury conference rooms. No tailored suits. No powerful men shaking his hand. Instead, he saw people who actually needed help. Mothers struggling to raise their children alone. Kids without anyone to protect them. Teenagers trying to find their place in a world that had already given up on them. And as he began his work, restructuring the finances, optimizing the budget to help more families, he realized something. There was value beyond money. The ability to change someone's life was worth more than all the wealth he had ever accumulated. After a long day at the center, Warren and Vanessa found themselves standing together in the hallway. You did well today, Vanessa said. There was no sarcasm in her voice, no skepticism, just acknowledgement. Warren turned to face her. Do you really think so? She held his gaze, then nodded. Yes. For the first time since their paths had crossed again, Warren felt something he hadn't dared to before. A flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally on the right path. Vanessa had once believed that nothing in this world could shake her. She had lived 15 years without Warren Kensington. She had raised 2 boys, protected them, loved them, all without the presence of that man. So why, now that Warren had finally returned, did her heart feel less certain than before? Perhaps it was because, for the first time, she saw a Warren who was no longer arrogant. No longer the man who had cast her out into the night with 2 newborns, but a Warren who was genuinely trying to make things right. Yet, was that enough for her to give him a chance? That evening, after Zion and Cairo had gone to bed, Warren remained in the living room, a cup of hot tea in his hands, one that Vanessa had given him. She sat across from him, studying him in silence. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then, Vanessa finally broke the quiet. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Warren?" Warren set the cup down, meeting her gaze. "I'm not expecting forgiveness overnight," he said slowly. "I know what I've done can't be undone in weeks or even months." Vanessa folded her arms, leaning back. "Then what are you expecting?" Warren took a deep breath. "A chance? A chance to prove that I've changed. Not with words, but with actions." Vanessa's eyes were sharp, though no longer as cold as before. "Do you really understand, Warren?" Her voice softened, but it carried weight. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Zion and Cairo. You left scars on them, ones you can't even see." Warren clenched his fists slightly, then nodded. "I know. Then are you ready to face that truth?" He didn't answer right away. Vanessa wasn't looking for promises. She was looking for proof. Warren exhaled and gave a single nod. "I am." Vanessa held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "All right," she said, "but there's one condition." She set her cup down, her expression serious. "If you truly want to be a father to Zion and Cairo, you need to understand that it won't happen overnight." Warren nodded. "I know." "No." Vanessa shook her head. "You think you know, but you don't. Not yet." She leaned forward, her voice steady. "Zion is still angry with you. Cairo doesn't know if he can trust you. They've spent their whole lives learning how to live without you, Warren. You can't just walk in and expect them to let you in immediately." Warren's grip on his hands tightened. "I don't expect that." Vanessa nodded. "Good." She paused before continuing. "There will be days when Zion won't even look at you. There will be times when Cairo won't want to speak to you, and you cannot walk away." Warren stilled. Vanessa's gaze was piercing. "You don't get to leave, Warren. Not again. Not because things don't go the way you want them to. You don't get to make the same mistake twice." A cold draft slipped through the window, but Warren didn't feel it. He felt her words cut into him instead. Because she was right. He had turned his back once, and if he did it again, he would lose them forever. Warren swallowed hard, then slowly nodded. "I promise." Vanessa studied him, searching for certainty in his answer. After what felt like an eternity, she sighed. "All right." The next morning, when Warren opened his eyes, he found himself still in the living room, having slept on the couch. For the first time in 15 years, he had woken up in the same home as Vanessa, Zion, and Cairo. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as someone trying to belong. When he stepped into the kitchen, Vanessa was cooking breakfast, while Zion and Cairo sat at the table. Both boys looked at him, but neither spoke. Warren took a slow breath, grabbed a coffee pot, and poured himself a cup. He didn't force conversation. He didn't try to prove himself. He simply existed in their space. Zion glanced at him, then picked up his bowl of cereal. "I'm heading out." Cairo stood more slowly, but before leaving, he paused. He looked at Warren for a long moment. Then, without a word, he gave the slightest nod. It was small, almost imperceptible, but to Warren, it meant everything. Vanessa observed the moment before turning back to the stove. She didn't look at Warren when she spoke. "You have a chance, Warren." Warren gripped his coffee cup tightly. "I know." Vanessa finally turned to him, her gaze still cautious, but softer than before. "Don't disappoint us." Warren met her eyes and gave a slow, firm nod. "I won't. Not again. Not ever." Warren Kensington was not a perfect man. He had made mistakes. He had lost his family. But instead of letting the past define him, he had chosen to fix what he had broken. And perhaps there was nothing more valuable than the chance to start again. Maybe he would never regain the 15 years he lost. But he had tomorrow, and he would not waste it. Vanessa had once believed that nothing in this world could shake her. She had lived 15 years without Warren Kensington. She had raised 2 boys, protected them, loved them, all without that man's presence. So why, now that Warren had finally come back, did her heart feel less certain than before? Maybe because for the first time, she saw a Warren who was no longer arrogant. No longer the man who had cast her out into the night with 2 newborns, but a Warren who was truly trying to make things right. Yet, was that enough for her to give him a chance? That night, after Zion and Cairo had gone to bed, Warren remained in the living room, holding a cup of hot tea, one that Vanessa had handed him. She sat across from him, eyes contemplative. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Warren?" Warren set his cup down, looking at her for a long moment. "I'm not expecting you to forgive me overnight," he said slowly. "I know what I've done can't be undone in weeks or even months." Vanessa folded her arms, leaning back. "Then what are you expecting?" Warren took a deep breath. A chance to prove that I've changed. Not with words, but with actions." Vanessa's eyes were sharp, though no longer as cold as before. "Do you really understand, Warren?" Her voice softened, but it carried weight. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Zion and Cairo. You left scars on them, ones you can't even see." Warren clenched his hands slightly, then nodded. "I know. Then are you ready to face that truth?" He didn't answer right away. Vanessa wasn't looking for promises. She was looking for proof. Warren exhaled and gave a single nod. "I am." Vanessa held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "All right," she said, "but there's one condition." She set her cup down, her expression serious. "If you truly want to be a father to Zion and Cairo, you need to understand that it won't happen overnight." Warren nodded. "I know." "No." Vanessa shook her head. "You think you know, but you don't. Not yet." She leaned forward, her voice steady. "Zion is still angry with you. Cairo doesn't know if he can trust you. They've spent their whole lives learning how to live without you, Warren. You can't just walk in and expect them to let you in immediately." Warren's grip on his hands tightened. "I don't expect that." Vanessa nodded. "Good." She paused before continuing. "There will be days when Zion won't even look at you. There will be times when Cairo won't want to speak to you, and you cannot walk away." Warren stilled. Vanessa's gaze was piercing. "You don't get to leave, Warren. Not again. Not because things don't go the way you want them to. You don't get to make the same mistake twice." A cold draft slipped through the window, but Warren didn't feel it. He felt her words cut into him instead. Because she was right. He had turned his back once, and if he did it again, he would lose them forever. Warren swallowed hard, then slowly nodded. "I promise." Vanessa studied him, searching for certainty in his answer. After what felt like an eternity, she sighed. "All right." The next morning, when Warren opened his eyes, he found himself still in the living room, having slept on the couch. For the first time in 15 years, he had woken up in the same home as Vanessa, Zion, and Cairo. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as someone trying to belong. When he stepped into the kitchen, Vanessa was cooking breakfast while Zion and Cairo sat at the table. Both boys looked at him, but neither spoke. Warren took a slow breath, grabbed the coffee pot, and poured himself a cup. He didn't force conversation. He didn't try to prove himself. He simply existed in their space. Zion glanced at him, then picked up his bowl of cereal. "I'm heading out." Cairo stood more slowly, but before leaving, he paused. He looked at Warren for a long moment. Then, without a word, he gave the slightest nod. It was small, almost imperceptible, but to Warren, it meant everything. Vanessa observed the moment before turning back to the stove. She didn't look at Warren when she spoke. "You have a chance, Warren." Warren gripped his coffee cup tightly. "I know." Vanessa finally turned to him, her gaze still cautious, but softer than before. "Don't disappoint us." Warren met her eyes and gave a slow, firm nod. "I won't. Not again. Not ever." Warren Kensington was not a perfect man. He had made mistakes. He had lost his family. But instead of letting the past define him, he had chosen to fix what he had broken. And perhaps there was nothing more valuable than the chance to start again. Maybe he would never regain the 15 years he lost, but he had tomorrow, and he would not waste it. The past can be forgotten, but mistakes leave scars. Will Warren prove he deserves a second chance? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping stories.